Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Christmas live tasting. And a Merry Christmas to you all, and hopefully you'll have a very happy New Year. We've been doing these tastings. What?
You're allowed to keep going now.
Have we started?
Yeah, we started.
You stopped me in my tracks.
Sorry, keep going.
So I've got to start again?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was rudely interrupted by one of my sons. So we've been doing these live tastings ever since lockdown, really. I did the first one, which we didn't send out tasting packs to back in March. And then we've been doing the tasting packs ever since then. And we thought it'd be rather fun to do this Christmas edition. I'm sure everyone's at home, and there's an excuse to have a few drams, and hopefully you'll enjoy this evening.
Yeah, so I think for tonight's one, which is slightly different, those who are following the last ones we've done, I think 6, 7 now, it's usually been the core range, Machir Bay, Sanaig, 100% Islay and Loch Gorm. For the Christmas one, slightly different. We've got Machir Bay and Sanaig, the first two, which are our sort of core range whiskies. But then to add something a bit different, we got the Club 9th edition, which will be the third one we taste. And the last one will be the PX finish, which is a single cask. And I would say with people, I think there was a competition with this. So we sent out around about a couple of hundred packs, I think, were sent out. And there is some winners of Distillery exclusive bottling, some T-shirts, some glasses and various things like that. We've got most of the winners have sent in the details, but there's still some out there. So if you open up your pack and you've got a winner's slip, then let us know so we can send you out your prize.
So just a few highlights of 2020. I know that there haven't been many highlights of 2020 with what's been going on around the world, but we've been going pretty strongly through the year, and this year was the first full year for the new still house that we completed in 2019, in the middle of 2019, but we've had a good run of it this year, and it's working exceptionally well, and it means we can do more experiments with yeast varieties and peating levels, and also barley varieties that we're growing here on the farm. So this year we filled about 2,000, well, we have filled exactly 2,430 casks. That's a mixture of mainly bourbon barrels and Oloroso sherry casks. But then also we also fill a lot of experimental cask types. And this year we filled some cognac casks and some Armagnac casks, and tequila casks and mezcal casks, which is something we're now allowed to do. Calvados casks. We filled some more Sauternes casks, which I'm really excited about because they arrived at the distillery just prior to Christmas shutdown, and they're absolutely superb. And we've filled those already. And we also filled earlier in the year some Pinot de Charente casks, which is an aperitif white wine from the western region of France, which would be quite fun. It's dry, and it'd be fun to see how that works out in the next few years. We only filled those in April, March this year. We've also bought some 2 4,000 litre vats, red wine vats, which we're using for marrying and just doing a few more experiments. It's quite fun to see how things marry together in these larger vats over a few months or so. So also this year, we took in our harvest in September, a little later than we hoped. We managed to get in 165 tons. It was pretty tricky towards the end of the ripening season, mainly because the weather turned against us, and then the barley started falling over. So it was tricky, but we got in 165 tons. 20 of that was Diablo, which is a new variety we haven't sown before. And then the tried and tested variety was 145 tons of Concerto, which has been our mainstay for a number of years now. This year, in 2021, we're growing Concerto and Sassy. What we do is mainly grow the Concerto variety as a mainstay, and then we grow roughly 10 acres of an experimental variety. But this year we've gone back to Sassy, which we grew in 2019, and we've already put that through the stills, and it's performed really, really well. We're really pleased with how that's performed. I did a video about tasting the Sassy spirit against the Concerto spirit a few weeks ago, and there's a marked difference. It's subtle, but there is a difference, and it's fun to work with different barley varieties because they do produce a different style of spirit, and we hope to then take those through into cask and then over the next 5, 6, 7 years or so, we'll do a limited release of the Sassy variety that we're growing.
Yeah. And it's good to say, if there's any questions that you've got, feel free to chuck them in. I know some people will know probably every little bit about Kilchoman, but if there's some people new to Calhoun, you might have been bought this as a gift for Christmas. If you want to know anything about the distillery, anything about the whiskies we do in the past or present, then feel free to put them in the comments, and I'm going to hopefully manage to keep up with them on my phone here, and we can get them back to you. Hopefully we can answer as many as we can. But for those who don't know Kilchoman, before we get into the whiskies, you wanted to give a brief 2-minute sort of summary of Kilchoman and the distillery and what we do?
Yeah, I mean, Kilchoman was founded in 2005 by myself and my wife, Cathy, and my 3 sons joined the business over the forthcoming years. I think Peter, the youngest, you joined first about 9 years ago. James also is in the business, and George as well. And they now run the sales marketing side. Kilchoman was all about creating a different distillery in terms of what we could tell people and have a unique selling point. And that was basing it on a farm here on Islay, this famous island for producing single malt whiskey. And I always wanted to make sure it was different from all the wonderful distilleries here on Islay that are famous around the world. So locating it on a farm and growing some of the barley ourselves and taking it right way through the whole production process that was really the key message I wanted to get across. And so we're doing that. We're very proud that we can talk about sort of a farm distillery in the sense that we look after the whole production process. Production in the early years was around about 50 to 60,000 litres, and every year since we started, we've increased production up to a level now where this year in 2020 we produced 363,000 litres. And although that sounds quite a lot, we do have capacity of 480,000 litres if we have a full year of production. So, it was all about gearing up and seeing how sort of sales went, I think, and 100,000 litres was always my target as far as production in the early years. And then we got the confidence that there was interest in what we were doing at Kilchoman, and more and more people were enjoying the releases we put out there. So we took the decision about 4 or 5 years ago to be able to double production, hence the new still house, and also we put in a new malt floor and kiln, which meant we could double the amount of barley that we grow on the farm. So all these things, and anybody in the whiskey industry will know that you have to plan well ahead for all these eventualities. And we're wanting to take the business on and spread the word about Kilchoman and build the brand around the world. So it's been a hard journey. The first few years are always very difficult, but now we're enjoying building the brand, and the boys will always tell me that they're much more able to take the brand forward than me, because I'm an old codger who doesn't understand these things. But we're in a good place now, and I think it's because of the interest in single malt around the world that we started the distillery at the right time. I think you make your own luck in this business, but I think we were in the right place at the right time, just as the single malt market took off, and we've been able to take advantage of that. So we're enjoying what we're doing now, and we're in a great place.
And you've got an excellent sales marketing team.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but they're not bad. They're doing a pretty good job, and I think
Thank you so kind.
Well, your father's always your hardest critic, I think, probably.
Yeah, yes.
But I think joking apart, I think what is tremendous for all of us connected with the distillery, and that goes for the production guys all the way through administration, bottling, all the guys. The fact that we've got a product now out in 50 markets around the world and still growing, it gives everyone a huge amount of satisfaction that we've built this from scratch and taking it on. And it's wonderful to get the comments that we receive about the malts we put out on the market.
We've got a couple of quick questions before we open up Machir Bay, the first dram. One from Brian Dvore.
Good pronunciation.
Dvore. Something like that.
Yeah.
Any unpeated casks in the warehouses?
Yeah, no, interesting question, because I think it's something that we can do more and more of. We have got some unpeated casks, and in fact, the club release that we're going to be tasting tonight is unpeated. Although when we talk about unpeated, back in the old days, we couldn't separate the low ones and fates, completely. So there always is a hint of peat in the release. But now that we have the new still house where we can separate everything out, we can experiment a lot more with unpeated varieties, more heavily peated varieties, and then we can talk about yeast varieties and barley varieties. So it's something that I'm very keen to share with everyone around the world.
And Daniel Lum, got a question here. When will the mezcal cask be available, and will there be any in Hawaii?
I think that we experimented with mezcal and tequila casks early this year. We filled some with new spirit, and we also used some for finishing. In other words, we 8 or 9 year old bourbons into mezcal just to finish them off, and we're delighted with how they're performing. And so it's exciting to see how they go. We're not filling that many, so we hope that we can get them out around the world in a limited edition release, because we did buy another tranche of tequila and mezcal casks towards back end of the year, and so we'll have a little bit more to share with everyone going forward. But it won't be a big part of what we do. All these experimental casks are fun to work with, but the core expressions are matured in bourbon and sherry.
You keep hitting the table, which I'm sure is helping the viewers.
Okay.
Causing them to be a little more drunk before we start.
Quite excited. Yeah.
I'm very, very excited.
Right.
So I think we'll start with the first whiskey. So Machir Bay is number one, which we'll start, which is our core range whiskey, and then, as I said, we'll go on to Sanaig, the club, and then PX to finish with.
So the Machir Bay, I think, is our core expression. It's the expression that sort of builds Calhoun in terms of the most competitively priced, and I think the vatting is how I like. Everyone knows I'm keen on bourbon cask maturation. So this is 90% matured in bourbon barrels and 10% in Oloroso sherry casks, sherry butts, and it has for something that's relatively young, we don't mind talking about the age. This is between 4 and 5, and a little bit more 6 year old, and we hope to just move the maturation, the age of the vatting, older and older as we go. But it's always difficult to move that too fast because of the number of casks we have in the warehouse. But this is between 4, 5, and 6 year old. It is quite light in colour.
So the first one was released in 2012, and that was.
Oh yeah, sorry, I've been interrupted because I'm not saying the right things here.
This is the first tasting we've done together. Apparently, I talk a lot.
Yeah, you talk a lot. I'm going to stop him now and say yes. He's absolutely right. The first Machir Bay was released in 2012.
Yeah, I just thought people might be interested.
Yeah,
that was almost all 3 year old, and now we're up to around 5, 6.
Yes.
It's slow, steady progression. But obviously, back to you now.
Thank you. Thank you. But I think Peter's right that we haven't been able to move the age profile very quickly. I was, right at the beginning, I thought, well, we can move it up relatively quickly. But I think as sales grew, it is always difficult to move it up when you're not producing very much in those early years. 50, 60, 70, 80,000 litres wasn't a great deal. And so we've had to keep the age relatively young. But I think anybody who's bought the 2009 vintage, I think, and they compare it with the Machir Bay, that's where I would like to get Machir Bay over the next 5 or 6 years, because that just shows a lot more age profile and cask. Oh, I'm hitting the table. I can't.
Doesn't seem to affect it too much, apparently. So we should be right.
Okay. So I mean, I think that this is youthful. There's no doubt about it, but it has a character. Even at this relatively young age, there's a lot of sort of maritime character, citrus and lemon notes. Is something that I always get from the Machir Bay. But you get a youthful character on the nose. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And the 10% of sherry just gives a little bit more depth of character and adds a little bit more weight. And I think that's important. It's bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered, and no added colour. Obviously, because of that strength, you don't have to chill filter, which does strip out some of the character. You're stripping out some of the proteins that cause a haze. And so bottling at that slightly higher strength means you don't have to do any of the chill filtration, and everyone's getting the most natural product with just a bit of coarse filtration to get the char and any bits in out.
And when you started Calhoun, is this the sort of flavour you were looking for? This sort of taste, the fruit, bit of smoke, or was it you were aiming for something in particular, or it was let's have that peating level and that?
I think
and see what happens.
I think I was back in the very beginning, back in 2002 when I met Jim Swan, who was my guru, who's the one who really set me on my way and helped set up the distillery and the spirit profile and the casks we used. And I said that I just wanted a spirit that was fruity, floral, and clean, and that we could age relatively quickly so we could get it on the market. I think, any new distillery will tell you that, if you can turn it around relatively quickly, then that helps cash flow and keeps the banks off your back. So I think that we were very fortunate that when we did run the stills, the spirit that we were collecting, Jim just turned to me and said, look, if we look after this, put it into the best wood we can lay our hands on, we'll be able to release it for 3 years of age. And so he was true to his word. I think that it's funny because it is a higher peaking level. This is 50 parts per million of phenols. And of all the standard bottlings here on Islay, it's the same as sort of Ardbeg. We buy the same malt specification from the maltings here on Islay as Ardbeg, but it is quite a different style of single malt.
I think that's what in tastings that we do, what surprises people most is we use the same peating level as Ardbeg, similar to Lefroy, Lagavulin, and that's sort of area of peating level, yet the taste isn't as earthy or heavy. It's got a lot more sort of fresh fruit to it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot to do with the character of the spirit. Maybe it's to do also with the size of our stills, which are very small compared with the other distilleries. Therefore, there's more copper contact. We've got this tall, narrow neck, which is something that Jim Swan was very keen for us to put in, and the boil bulb. So you're collecting only the lighter, fruitier alcohols. And I think all those things help. I think all parts of the distillation process play a part, but I think the spirit still in particular, plays the biggest part in the character of the spirit you're collecting.
And I think one of the things you always said is you were never aiming for an old whiskey. You were aiming for 20, 30-year-old whiskey. A lot of it was aiming for that young, youthful thing, as you said, with being able to bottle something young. So with Calhoun, although you're saying this is 5, 6-year-old, it's not too far away from where you see the peak Calhoun's, or is it?
No, I think I think when you look back in those days, it was pretty essential. When I said I was going to build a new distillery, everyone thought I was bloody mad and should be carted off to the nearest hospital.
Some of us are still saying that.
But I think what I was looking for was could we produce a single malt that we could release it at 3, 4, 5, or 6 years of age. Now, I think timing is, I was saying timing is so important because I think it was just as the industry and enthusiasts and whiskey clubs and all these people were prepared to experiment a lot more when we started to release our first single malt in 2009. And I think, I always say now, if I started the distillery 5 or 6 years earlier, we wouldn't have had the success we've had because people weren't ready to experiment with a very young, knowing it's only 3 years of age. And we didn't charge a fortune. We charged £45 a bottle, but it's a premium price. So unfortunately, people enjoyed it. And I think I've always said that you can sell your first bottle of first release. I don't think that's a problem because people are interested. I think it's your second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So I think we always set out to have a whiskey that would age relatively quickly. Though there's no doubt that now we've tasted some 14-year-old casks in the warehouse and they're spectacular. So it'll go on improving.
And one thing which probably know is as you've got them out in front of you, one of the big things that we do is non-chill filter, natural colour. So as you see them in the glass or in the bottle you've got here, nothing's been added to that.
No.
It's pure. And does that make a big influence? Was there a reason you were adamant that you don't want a chill filter, you don't want a colour?
I think that was the way the industry was going at the premium end. Independent bottlers and the like were doing releases of cask strength, maybe no chill filtration, certainly adding no colour. And then it was down to the cask quality that you were purchasing that determined the colour. And I think it's very important to buy the best quality wood. And again, Jim Swan pointed me in the right direction where I should buy all these casks. And to this day, I'm still buying casks from Buffalo Trace in the bourbon industry and Oloroso sherry casks from Miguel Martin. And they're spectacular. The consistency is fantastic. And then all the colour comes from the cask that you're maturing your whiskey in. And there's no hiding place.
Yeah, does it make a difference to the taste? Or
oh, yeah, that was the question, was it?
That was it. Not that I want to ask the same one again, but you didn't quite.
I think it makes a huge difference. So first fill bourbon, first fill Oloroso sherry cask, big influence, big impact, and therefore you're going to get a lot more character at an earlier age. So maybe the industry, 30, 40 years ago wasn't using first fill as much. They were using second, third, and fourth fill. and therefore the impact isn't going to be so good. And though you can take those casks way out in age profile, for us it was very important to buy fresh casks so that we could turn them around relatively quickly in the early years.
Just a couple of questions. So one before we move on to the Sanaig is, will the new stills change the character of the whiskey at all?
I think what was key for me was that we put in the same size and shape of stills, the same mash tun size and shape and all the rest. So, we went back to Richard Forsyth, who did all the production kit in 2005, and asked him to make sure that we got the same kit. Clearly, once we put it in and we ran the stills on the new side, we were holding our breath a little bit, but the spirit character is almost identical. Yes, you can go and take the spirit at the same cut point from the new still house and the old still house, and there's a slight difference, but it's very, very small. Yeah. And so I'm delighted that we're producing the same style of spirit. That was key to the future success of Calhoun, because we built a fan base on a style and we didn't want to change that.
And one more about Brexit. Will Brexit affect us at all at Calhoun?
Well, we've got a deal now. I think it would have affected us if we'd had a no deal or things had gone a bit pear-shaped. But now we have a clearer understanding the direction we're going in, and that we have free access to the market. And yes, there may be some charges for paperwork or what have you, but clearly there's going to be access without any tariffs or what have you. So that's a huge relief to the whole whiskey industry, I'm sure, and a lot of other businesses.
Yeah, keep that one short and sharp to avoid getting too political on that one. And one more before Sanaig. I know people are probably looking forward to moving on to number 2, but John Sutherland just asking about saying that he loves the experimentation, and do you think there'll be a time when you will focus on the results that happen and ultimately stick to one style rather than experiment? Sorry, I sort of asked my own question there and not read your question, but I love the experimentation you do, but do you think there'll be a time when you will focus in on some of the results and ultimately experiment less?
I think we've already experimented with a huge number of cask types, and I just read out 7 or 8 earlier on that we filled this year, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. But when one works really well, we'll fill more of them. And I think one cask type that worked incredibly well when we did it, and we got a lot of remarks from people around the world about how good it was the STR, the Shade Toasted and Recharred cask. These were ex-red wine casks. And again, I always go back to Jim Swan, because he was the pioneer of the Shade Toasted and Recharred cask with this cooperage in Portugal called Dias. And you'll now notice quite a few of the new distilleries are using Shade Toasted and Recharred casks for some of their sort of core expressions. And Cotswold Distillery down in England do it, and a number of other people, even Catalan Distillery, which Jim Swan was associated with, they use STR casks, and it did work incredibly well when we released it. It was 7 years of age when we released it, and we're now filling more of those casks, and we hope to introduce it as a core expression, maybe 4 or 5 years time when we've got more of them.
Yeah.
But I think, to answer the question a bit more, it's mainly bourbon. And there's no doubt that bourbon is sort of 65-70% of our new fillings goes into bourbon, and maybe 20% into sherry butts and hogsheads, and then the balance is the experimental casks. And we'll continue that process, because I love getting my hands on casks, and we've been very fortunate. Only one cask type that didn't work very well to start with, it was a bit all over the place, was Sauterne. We did a fully matured Sauterne. I'm of the belief that the Sauterne finish worked a lot better, which we did again maybe soon after that. It didn't give, I think the Sauterne fully matured, it didn't have the structure and the acidity and the backbone that I was looking for, though a lot of people enjoyed it. So, you can never be right. It's the consumer that's going to tell you if they enjoyed it or not. But overall, I think we've been fortunate that most of these cask types work very well, and we'll continue that process.
Yeah. Should we on to Stanley? Yeah, no, fully answered. Well done. Well done.
I over-answered it, didn't I?
No. Oh, no, I just realised we've gone 25 minutes. We fit through.
Okay, sorry.
So Sanaig is number 2. So the second of our core expressions, which we'll move on to the limited ones next. I mean, I always think that these are great to try side by side like this, because they're similar age, matured, but they're exactly the same spirit, aren't they, when they go into the barrel? So it's really only the cask that's made a difference.
Yeah, and I think, and you'll correct me, Sanaig was introduced in 2006, 16 or 14?
No,
My sales marketing don't even know. I don't even know.
I'll get back to you on that.
Oh,
maybe 50. Who knows?
I think it was 2014 and 16.
It was released a small amount in France for 6 months.
We did an experimental release in France. It went very well, and this really showcases, as Peter was saying, that the same spirit character into different casks. And I'm always of the opinion that cask plays the biggest part in the single malt that you'll end up enjoying and drinking. And this is now matured in 70% Oloroso sherry hogsheads and 30% bourbon barrels. And we use hogsheads to, I think, to be perfectly honest, it was to give it a big hit of sherry. Although you don't really get that on the palate or the nose, it doesn't sort of scream of this is over sherried, or you still get a lot of the coastal character there, and the smoke and the peat is there in the background. And I just think it works incredibly well. It's more forward and probably more sherried than our Loch Gorm, which is the limited release that we do on an annual basis. But for something that we put out there as a core expression to sit alongside Machir Bay, I think it really does fit very nicely alongside Machir Bay, which bourbon matured is sort of more vibrant and youthful maybe, whereas with sherry it gives it a little bit more roundness and softness and probably more approachable than the Machir Bay for people that aren't so used to this type of whiskey.
Yeah, I think sort of richness and the fruit sort of change for me, whereas with Machir Bay it's citrus, lemon, sort of real fresh fruit, and here you're getting that richer sort of darker fruit,
orange peel, sort of spiciness.
The spice really comes through on the palate, and then but I think it really does highlight how important the casks are, as you were saying, how important the casks are, because they're also bottled at the same strength, 46% ABV for both Sanaig and Machir Bay, same age, same peating level, same malt was used, same fermentation time. So it really is just those casks that have really changed, and you can see straight away on the colour of the dram as you pour it, how much that extra sort of sherry cask influence has come in. But I think to highlight, some people have mentioned before about the colour of Sanaig, and sometimes it's even darker than Loch Gorm, which is our entirely matured in sherry, but that's down to those hogsheads used here, it's butts for the
and I think you can't. I think sherry is more difficult to work with, sherry casks, because they don't all have that same consistency as bourbon casks tend to have, and therefore we can't always get the same cask every single time we buy new casks. They're going to be exactly the same. So we, as Peter pointed out, I think we did 2 or 3 releases back in 2019 and early 2020, which were very rich in colour. We're going back to that because I've asked Miguel Martin if we can have these cask types on a more regular basis, and he's assured us we can. And I think people preferred the richer, darker colour. And
that's what we want, really, isn't it? It's not Machir Bay and Sanaig. Yes, they'll always stay the same percentages of Sanaig, sherry and bourbon, but each year as the age goes up and up, in different casks, it's going to be natural variation, which is kind of what we want.
Yes, and I think
the same.
I think that's the key. I don't think we're going down the route of trying to produce a single malt that's the same year in, year out, and that's the art of the master blender in all these companies that do that. Of course, Peter's pointing out I am obviously the master blender. Master blender. I think what we're saying is it's not always going to be absolutely the same, but I think what's important is that Machir Bay and Sanaig are typical of what we're putting out there, and they're pretty similar, but sometimes they might vary slightly. The age profiles of both the Sanaig and Machir Bay are the same, 4, 5, and 6 years of age, and I think it really showcases Calhoun in a way that we're looking forward in terms of what we've mainly mature. So start with a Machir Bay and then go to 2009 vintage, and you see exactly what the direction we're going in. Sanaig, is in hogsheads, but then go and try the Loch Gorm, which again is older. It's matured in butts and just has a more balanced character, in my view. That's all. But I think the Sanaig has worked incredibly well, and I'm really proud of how well it's been received in the marketplace.
And a couple of questions on Sanaig. One is, how old is it? Which I'll answer quickly. It is around 5 years. So Machir Bay, as my dad was explaining, is roughly around that 5-year-old mark, and so is Sanaig. That's why they're so good to try side by side like this. And the other one is about a cask strength Sanaig, because we've done the Machir Bay obviously for Christmas this year. The first one, Machir Bay, we did a cask strength Christmas release, but is there?
Yeah, I think I'm always a fan of cask strength. I think it's the best way of drinking whiskey, because then the individual person is in charge of how they drink it. I think so. When you nose and taste these, because our spirit is very floral and sweet, you don't think you need a lot of water in these. You might need a drop or two, or some people might need a bit more, but that's all down to personal taste. Cask strength for me is what it's all about, but we have to reduce so that we can share more of our whiskey around. We've done various Machir Bay cask strengths with various tours we've done around the world. We've done a limited release of that. And then this year we did this Christmas edition. You know, when you compare the Machir Bay 46% and you compare it with the cask strength, I would always say, always go with the cask strength, because you've just got everything there in the glass, where it's been diluted, maybe a bit more than you would want it as an individual. But, you know, they nose very similarly. When you add water to the cask strength, you get it closer to the 46. Yeah. But cask strength, I think we'll do a Sanaig one. I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't do one.
Maybe the marketing.
Maybe the sales marketing. But I have the casting vote, obviously, on what's put out. But I think it would be fun to do a Sanaig cask strength to showcase. Maybe next Christmas.
Maybe next Christmas.
Yes.
And then when for cask strength, for those, you know, what is cask strength Machir Bay? So what percentage is it? And
yeah, I think cask strength Machir Bay and Sanaig will. I think it's around 59%, something like that. I can't remember what the Christmas edition was. My marketing department should know.
Well, I think it's actually 58 point something.
50, yeah,
but I don't know exactly. But yeah, we fill at 63.
60. We fill all our casks at 63.5, and just over the years they'll lose a little bit of strength. You know, 0.5% a year is average, depending on where they're warehoused. And so a Sanaig will be around the same, 58, 59% when we release it.
And then basically that's as natural a Calhoun as you can get.
I love it at cask strength. I think they're fantastic. So it's something we will do. So that answers that question.
Yeah, but obviously very good at this strength as well. I mean, it doesn't need, as you said, it doesn't need much water. But I think someone told me, I can't remember who it was, it might be Jim Swan, who said actually that you can actually really tell a good whiskey by actually adding water, and it keeps its character, it keeps its flavour. You know, something that doesn't have a lot of backbone or depth to the flavour, you'll add a drop of water and it will just completely disappear. But actually a good whiskey can take some water.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think, there's no right or wrong way of tasting whiskey with how much water you add. I think it's important not to add too much water to start with, and just taste it neat, and then add a few drops and keep tasting it till you get to where you want it as an individual.
Yeah.
And everyone drinks it differently.
And a couple more questions here. One on the Amberwick. Will there be another Amberwick?
The mess.
The mess.
I think it's something that always happens in a distillery. We're just happy to put a release out like that, because it was a mistake, and I remember getting pretty annoyed about it at the time. But then we just decanted it out. It basically was Machir Bay mixed with a port cask release that we were doing in 2014, I believe, and we just put it into bourbon barrels and left it. And it just so happened that we went back to it and looked at it back end of 2019 and thought, Christ, this is actually a very interesting release. So, you know, it was a mistake, but it came around, and it suddenly was a release that was clearly enjoyed by a lot of people.
I obviously didn't answer the question correctly. But it was, will there be another?
Oh.
But thank you for telling us what Amber was. If someone writes that,
okay,
will there be another one?
Should I just answer the question with a couple of words?
Yeah, is that right? Well, I don't think we can. Is it
well,
again?
Only possible to do an Amber if we do have another cock up or mess at the distillery, because we did it tongue-in-cheek because it wasn't supposed to happen. So whether we're doing another one all depends on Robin and his production guys, and whether they open the wrong valve in the vats and something happens. Yeah,
and a quick question on the Founders Cask release that we do for the UK. Is there Cask 3 release 2020 edition? I'll ask my brother, who's here somewhere. And he doesn't know either. Perfect. So George, our eldest brother, is the UK ambassador. There was a release that was a week or two ago, but I think that was the second one, if I remember correctly. So the third one, I think that happened 2 weeks ago, or will be happening.
So the sales and marketing team are right on this. They're right on this.
Well, I'm international markets. Okay. George is UK, but if you leave your name, I presume it's on the question, so we'll get back to you on that one. And another quick question before we move on, just on the mezcal and tequila, and when they'll be released. I think you mentioned earlier, we've got maybe 6, is it? That will be released in the next few months or so?
We've got some finishes of mezcal and tequila that we finished in the summer, and so they're ready to go, but they're not very many of them, because we only bought a very few tequila and mezcal casks then suddenly they worked really well, so we bought a whole load more. So we're releasing some, I think, in the spring, a single cask, there's finishes, and then we've just literally just before Christmas we filled another tranche of test tequila and mezcal that will be ready to release later in the year, a single cask. Obviously the fully matured ones won't be released for a number of years.
Yeah. So I think UK, Europe, Asia and America, we plan to release a small number of single casks in there, so the early 3-4 months of next year. So there should be some available, but obviously single casks, there won't be a huge amount of them. But those will be the finishes. And one on, how does Sanaig compare with Loch Gorm?
I think, as I was saying earlier, I think it's a bigger hit of sherry influence just because of the hogsheads that we use, which give it that early burst of sherry influence. Whereas we fill up all our Loch Gorm releases into sherry butts, and they just take a little longer to come round. And I think I'm on record as saying the 2020 release of Loch Gorm was probably the best one we did so far. I think it was over 9 years of age, if I was correct. And it was just had this wonderful balance of sherry influence, but not too much, and the coastal maritime peat influence from the Islay character. And I think a lot of people commented on how well that's married together, and we're delighted with the comments we've received. The Sanaig is very much sorry.
No, I was just going to say.
No, can I finish?
Yeah.
So Sanaig is more about younger hogsheads that we know that work well. But when you compare Sanaig and Loch Gorm together, there's a marked difference between the two styles.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, definitely. All I was going to say with Loch Gorm is, you mentioned about, I think it really works well. You said 9 years old in those big 500-litre sherry butts, whereas for the first one, or was it two, we used some hogsheads, and that was a bit too intense for the smaller cask, but it really works well. 9-10 years old hogsheads is, sherry butts are amazing.
Yeah, the balance is just beautiful.
And we'll quickly run through a couple of questions before we move on to the club release. Will there be more bottles of Loch Gorm in 2021 compared to 2020?
Yes, there will be. I think we haven't actually announced it yet, but yes, we just have to be very careful about what we put out there, just so we preserve our stock going forward. I'm the one who has to make sure there's stock. The boys are always wanting me to release more.
That's where we have differences of opinion.
Yeah, because I think I'm in the old school way. It's important to carry some of these casks forward to maybe 14, 15, 16, or even older, because I'm really looking forward to seeing how that they mature going forward. I still believe that Calhoun will be at its peak between, say, 15 and 12 years of age. I think already I feel that that's where I see us sort of sitting in terms of full maturation, just because although they'll be fine going forward, you'll just start losing some of that sort of character, the maritime character and the peat and smoke style that really is synonymous with all Islay style releases. And I think it's probably maybe because you don't see a huge number of Islay releases at 30, 40 and 50 years of age. I think you do, obviously, but they change in character as they mature going out over the years.
Right, shall we move on to whiskey number 3 is the club release. And I'll just show you, so we've got one bottle here, which is, if that's in the screen, hopefully. It's the club edition, the 9th edition. So we got it in this box here. And this is the whiskey for those who haven't seen it. So this is something released about a month ago now in November. And it's something that we got a club where it's obviously free to sign up to and be a member, and you get a newsletter about all the different releases we do, some distillery information. And then every year we've done a club release. This is the 9th version of it. And we'll do it next November and November after that. We usually try to do something a bit different, something we haven't released before, or something a bit older than most of our releases. And this year certainly is something a bit different, but I'll let my dad talk you through that one, because it is something that is pretty rare. Cast, isn't it? That we've got. We
filled about 20 Oloroso sherry hogsheads back in 2012 with unpeated from our own barley grown at the distillery, and these have been left to mature, and we just felt they'd just come on beautifully, and they were ready to release, and we just felt it was appropriate to release them to the club, which we do on an annual basis. So these are 4 Oloroso sherry hogshead filled in 2012 and bottled in late 2020. So 8 years of age, 1,311 bottles. The strength, I can't actually remember. Yes, the strength is 58.2.
58.6.
58.6.
Need some new glasses.
I need some glasses. But I when I say unpeated, it's not totally unpeated, because although we use unpeated malt and we put through the system, there's always a trace of the low wines and fades from the previous run. So there was always going to be a little bit, but it
certainly on the nose, it's so different from the Machir.
Yeah, I think when you taste the Sanaig, you immediately get a lot of the sort of maritime smokiness coming through. You don't get this on this.
No.
You just get a spiciness and a richness, but absolutely no real hint. There is a little bit maybe on the back of the nose, but it's not. Light. It's very light, and the colour is beautiful, rich colour.
I think this is a publican barley that we harvested for this.
Yeah, I was supposed to say that, wasn't
No.
I?
Yeah. So publican, we harvested publican barley.
So publican, we used when we started growing barley in 2005 at the distillery. We started with Optic, and then we moved on to publican in maybe 2008-9, and so this was from the publican barley variety, which was again quite a sturdy sort of variety that grows well here on Islay, which is we get battered by the weather, and it's not the ideal growing region for malting barley, but we've shown that we can do it, and we've got better and better at what we do with it in terms of litres of alcohol, because that's important. But I think this is it's fun to do these little experiments. With unpeated is something we do a bit more of now that we're producing more spirit, and I think it's worked wonderfully well. I think it is different. You do get a slight hint on the back of the palate, especially.
I think it's on the back of the palate. You get a little hint of smoke, but it's nowhere near what these are. I think that's where the big difference is. On the back of the palate is the sweetness, whereas on the previous ones it was that smoke.
I mean, if you tasted that blind, you wouldn't necessarily put it on either.
Yeah.
And I tasted that, neat at 58.6, and although you would argue that you need a few drops of water just to open it up and allow you to taste behind the alcohol, it's perfectly approachable at that strength. Although you're kidding yourself if that's the best way of drinking it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's always important to add a few drops of water just to open it up.
And that's the thing where the difference is up to everyone is cask strength. It's great for maybe the finish where you get that long taste, which you get with this one, which is constantly now speaking the development of the flavours, that light fruit, that sweetness coming in, but a few drops of water will open it up. It will be a bit softer, but you'll get different flavours.
And I think the thing about all Calhouns I find is that long lingering finish with all of them, and this has a particularly long finish on the back of the palate, and it just fills your mouth, and there's a wonderful mouthfeel. So 8 years of age, you could argue that's ready to go. You don't necessarily need to leave it. You could argue that you could leave it another 3 or 4 years to see how it pans out, but maybe the sherry influence will come through a bit more, and then you won't maybe get the balance between the spirit character or the whiskey character from the distillery.
I think the cask strength for me has always surprised me when we still release 5, 6, 7-year-old cask strength. This is 8 years old, but the amount of character and flavour that's in there, and it's not burning your throat with alcohol. It's not too far, which you can actually get with some 15 or 20-year-olds in the cask. But with this cask strength, it's actually powerful with flavour. And
I think it's easy to realise, as it gets older, you're going to pay more money, but it doesn't always mean you're going to get value. So whiskey's ready when it's ready to go, and I think more and more people are accepting that, because more and more people are interested in distilleries and their style of whiskey, and non-aged. Obviously, the battle will rage about non-aged against age, but we're putting more and more information on the bottle.
And in terms of the barley, obviously we harvest things around 200 tons or so every year. The publican, we actually weren't looking at the taste differences back then, but we are now, obviously, with the varieties we're growing. And did you now notice the difference in the barley variety? So this is publican, but we're doing Concerto or Diablo or Sassy, whatever it is.
Well, to be perfectly honest, we've only just started doing those experiments. In the last 3 years, we've grown different barley varieties, only 10 acres. It's fun to do because it's something that people now talk more about and want to have more information about. And so, yes, I think the main thing is, you go for a mainstay variety that gives you a good tonnage and all the rest, because that's key. But it's also fun to do these experimental ones that might work or might not work. So, you know, the Sassy has worked, and we grew Diablo this year. We'll have to wait and see how that goes when we put it through production. But you know, like with yeast varieties, you know, that's another area that I'm looking forward to doing more experiments with, because it does change the character of the spirit. There's absolutely no doubt about it. So barley variety can change the character to a certain extent. Yeast variety can, and of course, you know, certain things you do in production in terms of the cut points at the spirit end is also going to change things as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't realise when we first started telling people about us being a farm distillery and doing the growing, the malting, the peating, all the way through to bottling with 100% Islay. So this is, you know, gone about 200 yards in its total lifespan. You know, people don't realise that's not how whiskey's done across Scotland or, you know, on Islay. We are the ones that do it from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few. I mean, I always would say that, you know, my friends down at Springbank clearly do the whole production process on the site for everything they do, but we can just talk about being a farm distillery and growing some of the barley in the fields, and I think that's key. And you know, when we started the distillery, I always felt that we needed a point of difference, unique selling point. You know, there are 100 distilleries in Scotland already, so if you just build another one like all the others, what point of difference you're going to have? So I think, you know, it has been key to our development, and it's something that I think people have engaged with, because it's something that everyone's interested in now, is the provenance of whatever you buy and in the shops or whatever, food or drink or.
And I'll just say I added a bit of water to the club there, and it's opened up. It's very different. Whereas before you got that longer finish, and now I'd say it's sweeter. A bit of water, it's softened it down. It's much sweeter, particularly on the finish. Yeah. And I think you're missing out on those fresh fruits, so it's a balance of what you want.
I think as an individual, that's why I'd always stress that don't add half and half straight away. You know, just do it slowly and add a few drops of water, taste it, and then go back to it. And if you think, well, it'd be fun to just try a few more drops, and it does change character. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But always start off by tasting them at full strength, and then add the water as you go.
And we'll just get back to a couple of questions come in. Jamie Blanco is 50 today, apparently. So happy birthday to you. Your brother Bill has asked us to be mentioned. So happy birthday to you. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope we've not ruined it for you. And a couple more questions here. Oh, and good news. Our friends at Kilchoman, some friends over in Germany, who fortunately are more on the ball than us today. I mentioned that was the third batch that came out in December. So I did know it was mine. I selected this one, the red wine finish, but I didn't know if it was the second or third, unfortunately. So it is that one. It is a red wine finish. I think there's reading here 56.4% that one, and 240 bottles. So single cask, and that one was the third edition. And another question about, do you know what next year's club release will be?
No, we haven't.
I can say definitely not, because usually he makes his mind up very short before the release date, so we have to then rush and get the labels ready and get everything ready for release. But usually sort of make a decision once you peruse the warehouse.
I think I just need to go into the warehouse and have another good look. But I think what we're always trying to do with the club is do something different, and something that we haven't done before. And we're now able to go into the warehouse and find some different things that we maybe hadn't done before. So that's what I'll be trying to do for the next club release, so that the club members have the opportunity of tasting something slightly different from the distillery.
You could always leave it up to me. And
No. You just
maybe the year after.
But if you can't remember that there was a founders, that was the third founders release.
We'll move on to the next.
I'm not going to let you loose in the warehouse quite yet, anyway.
Yeah. I think the next whiskey is good again to try. So similarly, the first two were good to try side by side. The next two are good to try side by side, both being cask strength.
Yeah.
But now, whereas the club edition was cask strength, but a vatting of 4 casks and unpeated sherry maturation, we're now stepping back to the normal Kilchoman sort of style of 50 ppm, and it's a PX finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So, people ask about how much production is from our own barley that we grow. We've tried to get it back up a bit. We're up now probably about between 20 and 25% of our production is from our own barley that we grow and malt at the distillery. But the balance is all from malt we buy from the Portland maltings here.
We do keep them separate. So
yeah, we keep them completely separate throughout the whole process, and that's key for us. So the 100% Islay release, that for me it's what Calhoun's about. The fact we've taken it from growing right the way through. It's something that we're very proud of at Calhoun, and is having this annual release, not big quantities because we don't have a lot of it that we mature, but it's something that we're hugely proud of, and it's something that's gaining a momentum, and it's very different from our core range because of the peating levels much lighter.
Yeah. And I've got the information for the single cask, which you might not have.
No, I do know. I've got it down here.
Right.
So this is 7 years matured in a bourbon barrel.
You don't sound sure.
7 years matured in the first fill bourbon barrel. And then we finished this in a Pedro Ximénez sherry cask. And Pedro Ximénez is the really sweet, dark, rich sherry style. We've used these on many occasions because they've worked really, really well. And 4 months is probably not as long as we might have done, but I think
it's one of the shorter releases we've done, but it's
surprising how much sherry influence there is. And you look at the colour, and it's a lovely, rich, dark colour already, and certainly a lot richer than just straight bourbon cask maturation. And the 4 months maturation, it just given a totally different character.
I think it's just bizarre how much almost you've got, and that shows. Are these Miguel Martin or these Diaz?
Yeah, no, these are Miguel Martin. There's a spiciness on the back of the palate, and a sort of peppery spiciness on the back of the palate. And I think a few drops of water just allow that to sort of settle down a bit. But God, that's really excellent for something that's only had 4 months maturation. But I think 4 months finishing. And that's a lot to do, as we were talking earlier, about the quality of the wood that we use. And these contacts that Jim Swan gave me in those early years really do produce some stunning casks that we can utilize. And from Miguel Martin, we've bought Fino casks. We did the Fino release in the autumn. That was 4.5 years maturation, and that was stunning in its character style. It's completely different from other things. And so I know Peter's now looking at me saying, well, we should be talking about this one, not
not no. The Fino was there. No. I was actually just looking at the colour.
So I mean, I think it, and we're looking to fill some Manzanilla casks, which is even drier than Fino. Not big quantities, but Miguel's, I've been out there a few times, and he's got an amazing operation, and he's really passionate about these casks that he sends to the whiskey industry, and we're very fortunate to be working with him. And this has worked really, really well. Just for those short few months of maturation, it's completely changed the character. And it's given a real lift in terms of.
I think it's finished, particularly that sort of sweetness that comes through, and because you always get that, I guess, balance between the sort of like fresh fruit, a little bit of sweetness, and smoke with Calhoun, but on the finish, it's that sweetness that takes over and really comes through with that rich caramel,
real sweetness on the back of the
whereas palate. Usually it's much more of a fresh fruit to the finish with the bourbon barrel, but it's changed completely now.
And we've done a number of single casks with longer finishing with PX casks, 6 or 8 or 10 months, but then some of these casks will be different, and this one was obviously quite a rich cask. We felt that it was ready to go at 4 months.
Yeah, and I would say this one. So I think this cask is on our website at the moment. So we sell some of our range through the website. I think there's a 50 bottles or so left of the single casks on our website. If you did enjoy this one, then you can get it there. But if not, then we are doing another PX release in the spring next year, which we've actually done a number of single casks, maybe as many as 30 or 40 PX finished single casks over the years. But we're doing a general release in the spring where we'll do around about 10 or 12,000 bottles for worldwide, which will be similar characteristics to this, but obviously reduced to 46 or 50%.
Be reduced between 46.
Oh, you're not sure now,
between 46 and 50%. And it will be slightly different because it's full maturation, so there'll be a little bit more depth. But these 4 months have made an incredible difference to this bourbon cask, and so we're really looking forward to doing a fully matured release in the spring.
Oh, great. And that's, I think the finish on that is unbelievable. It's still going.
No, it's stunning. It's stunning.
But we've got 5 minutes to go, so some few questions. So one is, how do you think the location affects your whiskey? If you move the distillery elsewhere, what characteristics do you think might change? How much do you believe water, peat, terroir, etc. affects the flavour? I
think location is key to the style of whiskey you're going to produce. And I think here on Islay, we're a little island off the west coast, and therefore the weather conditions are very different from mainland, and that will have an effect. I think when we talk about provenance, I would always say the peat has the biggest impact on the style of whiskies that we produce. We cut all our peat locally, and of course the peat here is soaked in salt and sort of coastal characteristics coming through. Whereas the argument for me is when people have looked how successful the peaty whiskies from Islay have been, the mainland have started releasing peated variety, limited releases maybe, but they have a more wood smoke style of peat, and we don't. We have a much more coastal. So when you look at the west coast of Scotland, you're looking at the Mull of Kintyre and Springbank, and going up Talisker and Tobermory and further. You could always argue those are similar style of peat they use to cut and use. And I think location has a massive role. And all over Scotland we have this wonderful pure water. I think if we picked up Calhoun and moved it to the mainland, it probably would change, because unless we bought the peat from here and the water source was as good as this one here, I think location to me was key when we chose to build the distillery on Islay. I think mainly because Islay has this massive reputation around the world for fantastic single malt. So that's why I wanted to latch onto that, and it clearly helped that Kathy, your mother, had been coming to Islay all her life. Oh, it's lucky it's your mother. That's unfortunate. That she'd been coming here all life. So persuading her to come back and live here wasn't too difficult.
An easy task. We were probably easy. I was about 13 at the time, so that was easy enough. And if you could wind back time and do something differently in the distillery, with the benefit of hindsight, what would it be? Also, what's the biggest stroke of luck you've had?
Well, I think if I did it all again, which I'm not going to, I would have gone to Richard Forsyth and said, do me a turnkey operation. And at the time, and he always reminds me every time I see him, and he always reminds me, well, I would have done it. But at the time, his price I thought was outrageous. And therefore, I tried to cobble it together, and doing it again, no chance. I recommend to anybody who comes to see me about building a distillery, just go and get some expert to do it and do the whole operation, because they'll do a very good job. And it might cost you a bit more at the time, but in the long run, it'll save you money, because things obviously, and I won't talk about it now, but they clearly went very wrong at the beginning. So that's what I would do differently if I did it again. What was the other one?
Second-hand equipment and cobbling pipes. And,
what was the other one?
A bigger stroke of luck you've had, if you did have one, or skill?
Luck.
Probably.
Luck. I mean, I don't think it's luck. I think it's it was that I think fortune was that our spirit, character, and quality came good at a young age, and that made turning the business around a lot easier than if I'd had to wait 8, 10 or 12 years before I released my first single malt.
Not 3 great sons to manage the marketing department.
No, it's great. But in all seriousness, it's great to have my sons working alongside me. I mean, I never imagined that would happen, and that I would start a business that they'd all be working in the business. So clearly that I don't want to make them too big-headed or anything, so I'm not going to.
Unprompted.
No.
And a couple of, we've only got 1 or 2 minutes left. Will you continue to release single casks? And when is your business centre back open as normal?
Well, that's the first question. The second part of that question first. The visitor centre, clearly, at the moment, we're not sure when we're going to be opening it, but hopefully it will be in March, April. But who knows? Really, it's very difficult to forecast what's going on at the moment. But we're keen as everybody to get up and running in the visitor centre. We opened it. Obviously, had a big party in February last year, earlier this year, and we hope to get that open again. What was the other part of that question?
I was just trying to find out if it's going to just completely stop it after an hour. Okay. We've only got 1 minute left.
What was that?
But the other part was single casks. So we're going to continue.
Oh no, I mean single casks to me, the epitome of what we do. We don't sell any of our bulk whiskey to the independent bottlers. We enjoy sharing these single casks around the world with our distributors and their customers, and we'll continue to do that. It's something that really epitomizes what Calhoun's about in terms of offering single casks around the world.
Yeah. And were you a master distiller prior to Calhoun? Master
No,
distiller, master blender.
master something. Anyway. Look, I think it's an overused term. Look, I've learned a lot. I was in sales marketing before I built the distillery. Production was something I knew nothing about. But as I've talked a lot about Jim Swan, and Jim to me was the reason that Calhoun has had the success it has. And so he taught me everything. And although I was in the wine industry before, so nosing and tasting was something I did before in the wine industry, moving into the whiskey industry, which I did 25 years ago, did a lot of tasting and nosing of casks, and therefore you get some sort of
that was on the independent bottling
Yeah.
you did for 10 years.
Yeah, I did, yes,
10 years.
10 years. And before that I was in the wine trade. I think Jim taught me a huge amount about, and he used to come over every 3 months to just go through the warehouse and taste casks and just give me a few sort of pointers as to what was going on. And I've really learned it all from him. And yes, I am a master
something.
I'm a master something. And yeah, I choose all the casks, and I really, really enjoy it. I think if you work in one distillery, you get to know your whiskey pretty well, because you're tasting casks in the warehouse on a regular basis. And now my production manager Robin, he's in there with me, and I'm trying to give him the pointers, and he's come along great, and he selects a lot of the single casks that we put out on the market.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wrap for time for now, but we'll try and get back to those questions. If you've missed any, comment now, and we'll try and get back to all of them as much as we can. But a Merry Christmas to everyone, Happy New Year, and thank you all for watching. I don't know how many of you stay tuned in, but hopefully at least a couple, and thanks for listening. And
well, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and we look forward to hopefully welcoming you to the distillery in 2021 at some point. Thanks very much indeed.
It's an pleasure.